Republicans, on the other hand, it's going to be a different story. They're more homogenous, and some people refer to it as MSNBC. They refer to the Republican National Convention as the white power hour because that's what it's going to look like. You're going to see a stark difference. You can say what you want to about Democrats. I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but I study both. You're going to see a stark difference between the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention. All right, so we should be broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Welcome to the African History Network show. It's Sunday, August 23rd, 2020. And we're also broadcasting on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF. And also you can download the iHeartRadio app to your smartphone and search for 9:10 a.m. Superstation because 9:10 a.m. Superstation is now on iHeartRadio. Okay, so on tonight's show, I want to deal with a few different topics. Now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris accepted the Democratic Party's nomination for president and vice presidential candidates. We saw that this past week. And I had said before that I was going to go back and revisit Joe Biden's 22-page agenda to empower African Americans, to empower Black America. Now, if you remember, you listened to the show, I spent 6 weeks and went through and broke down a different part of Joe Biden's plan each one of those 6 weeks because it's broken into 6 parts. OK, and I had said, OK, now that he has the nomination, I'm going to go back through and revisit that. And one of the reasons why is some people didn't hear me do it before. And those who may not have access to internet, things like that, can only listen to the show on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, WFDF. Some people didn't hear it before. Other people didn't know I didn't do it. And judging by some of the comments that I see on social media talking about politics, things like this, and we want a Black agenda, all this stuff, it appears that people don't know that Joe Biden put out a very detailed, comprehensive agenda that came out early May 2020 by some of the comments that I'm seeing. OK, so we're going to go back through and we're going to spend the next 6 weeks, the next 6 shows, and go through and break this down once again. And pages 2 through 11 deal with economic empowerment for African Americans. All right. Then we see that Ice Cube did a video a day or so ago, and he said he saw the Democratic National Convention, and he said, what do Black people get? Things like this. Now, I know he put out his contract with Black America. When I go through and look at it, some of the things he talks about there, Joe Biden has in his agenda that came out early May. And I did a post on social media. I did a post on our social media platforms for this show. And as you know, I think Ice Cube means well, but it seemed like he had read Joe Biden's Black agenda or agenda to empower Black America. OK, because as I said before, white people can't give us our own agenda. OK, a Black agenda is what we present to them. All right. So I think Ice Cube means well, but I'm not sure he read Joe Biden's policy platform. OK, and then when I go through and when I watch the 3 minute and 6 second video that Ice Cube did, he didn't mention Joe Biden's plan for Black America at all, which once again leads me to believe maybe he didn't read it. OK, so, going back to early May, I talked about Diddy. And Diddy said that he was going to he may hold the Black vote hostage and things like that. I dealt with Diddy then, and I did a comparison at the time between I did a comparison again between the Democratic presidential candidates and their policies pertaining to the African-American community. OK, we dealt with that. Go back and listen to the March 17th, 2020 show where I go deep into their policies. OK, and we looked at the policy matrix that the root.com put together. They pulled together policy experts to put together a policy matrix to evaluate the Black agendas and policies of the various candidates. All right. So we did that March 17th. Then when Diddy made his comments, I went through again and dealt with the candidates' policies, including Joe Biden. Now, that was a few days before Joe Biden came out with his plan to empower Black America. That came out either May 4th or May 5th, 2020. All right. Then we went through and we spent 6 weeks of this show breaking down his plan. Now that he has accepted the Democratic nomination and he has chosen a vice presidential candidate, now we're going to go through and look at his plan again. OK, so because we deal with facts and evidence here. So other people, they deal with other stuff or that's on you. OK, we don't do that here. OK, we deal with facts and evidence. All right. So we'll talk about that. Then also Forbes.com had a good article because all this stuff ties together. COVID-19, State of Black America report from the National Urban League. All this ties in together. Ice Cube's comments, Joe Biden's Plan to Empower Black America that came out May 4th, 2020. And a lot of people don't know it exists. OK, and they're saying, what do we get? And I asked, where have you been? Obviously, you haven't been watching this show, but OK. Almost 50% of Black-owned businesses have been wiped out due to coronavirus economy. Really? I thought it doesn't matter who you vote for. Because this idiot in office has screwed up the economy, the largely healthy economy. It wasn't a perfect economy, wasn't the greatest economy in the history of the world. But this idiot has screwed up a largely healthy economy, which then did more harm to African-American owned businesses. But because many of us don't understand the concept of protecting gains that were made and don't understand how who's in the White House impacts the economy, which then impacts your Black-owned business. Because a lot of people say, well, we don't need to see in 2016. A lot of people were saying we don't need to vote. We just need to do economic empowerment, OK, and invest in the stock market and build businesses. I said, that's good. But we also need to vote strategically because I understand how laws and policies impact the economic environment that your Black-owned business operates within. So now, because you have an idiot in the White House who doesn't understand economics, who has declared war on the scientists, who called coronavirus a hoax early on, now almost 50% of Black-owned businesses have been wiped out due to the coronavirus economy. Now, that's a lot of African Americans who invested their life savings, invested their 401k plan, invested personal savings, maybe put their home up to get a loan from the bank. We don't understand how elections have consequences. Also, in the past week or so, the State of Black America report came out from the National Urban League. They released it virtually August 13th. State of Black America report 2020 reveals how COVID-19 is pulling back the curtain of racism. Really? COVID-19 is pulling back the curtain of racism. At the same time, Donald Trump's attorney general is in court right now trying to repeal the entire Affordable Health Care Act and kick 20 million people off of health care. And the Affordable Health Care Act gave health care to 3 million non-elderly African Americans who did not already have health care. We also saw this past week that the Senate intelligence report reveals new evidence of Trump campaign working with Russia. Seems like somebody that hosts a show on this network has been saying that for years. Also, we saw last weekend was National Reparations Day as well. OK, so we'll deal with these topics and more on the African History Network show. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events and history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And you can sign up for our email newsletter there as well. If you'd like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. All right. And when you follow us on our social media platforms, turn on notifications so you know when we go live. Because some people are not being properly notified through YouTube and Facebook. Not exactly sure why. But as Michelle Obama said, it is what it is. All right. Also, another story I want to talk about is billionaire Robert F. Smith is fighting U.S. criminal tax inquiry. I posted about this. Originally saw the story from thegrio.com. They picked up the story from Bloomberg.com. I hope all this is not true. He does a lot of good work. This brother does a lot of good work. He's the richest African-American man in the country. And you remember he pledged to pay off the student loan debt or the student debt of the 2019 Morehouse College class. OK, so we're going to talk about that some as well. OK, I know we're coming up here on break in a few minutes, so let's jump into these topics here. All right. Now, I first talked about Joe Biden's plan for Black America some months ago, going back to May. And I knew it was coming out because I saw on his website, joebiden.com. This is not an endorsement. I'm just explaining this to you. I saw on his website that it had an update and it had highlights of his plan for Black America. OK, so that told me, OK, an agenda is coming out. If we go and look at the article you've heard me talk about before from May 5th, 2020, May 5th, 2020. From blackpressusa.com, blackpressusa.com. Now, Black Press USA is that's the publication of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. The National Newspaper Publishers Association is an association of African-American owned and operated, well, at least African-American owned, but probably African-American owned and operated newspapers. OK, and it's about 230 of them, OK, that make up this association. All right. They've also interviewed a few months ago. They also interviewed Joe Biden as well. OK, now they have endorsed Joe Biden, just so you know, but they've also interviewed Joe Biden. And if you go to follow them on Facebook, National Newspaper Publishers Association, you could watch that interview there. OK, but they had an article that came out May 5th, 2020, Joe Biden's plan for empowering Black America. Joe Biden's plan for empowering Black America. Now, once again, this is not an endorsement. I'm not telling you who to vote for. OK, but if you can breathe and you have vision, you can probably see who not to vote for. I mean, I'm just is OK. All right. But, you know, I'm just saying Joe Biden's plan for empowering Black America. So just a few highlights from this article. It says Biden said the plan reflects many months of work and feedback from local elected officials, activists, organizations, practitioners, policy experts, strategists, and young people. It was a group that put this together. His campaign called the plan, quote unquote, a living document. It said the Biden team looks forward to hearing from everyone as they continue to develop the Democrats' vision for all of America. We need a comprehensive agenda for African Americans with an ambition that matches the scale of the challenge and with a recognition that race neutral policies are not a sufficient response to race-based disparities, end quote. They said the plan is broken into 6 parts. The 6 parts deals with advance the economic mobility of African Americans and close the racial wealth and income gaps. That's 1. 2, expand access to high quality education and tackle racial inequity in our education system. 3, make far reaching investments in ending health disparities by race. 4, strengthen America's commitment to justice. That deals with criminal justice, things like that. 5, make the right to vote and the right to equal protection real for African Americans. 6, address environmental justice. Okay, so after we go through 6 weeks, deal with this, then we'll also look at Ice Cube's contract with Black America. And I commend Ice Cube for putting together experts to actually put this together, as opposed to just putting the video out, just talking, right? He really work to put something like this together. But some of the things that he talks about in his contract with Black America, Biden has in his plan for empowering Black America that came out months before, just so people understand. Okay. All right. We're coming up on a break. We're going to jump into this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation WFDF. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by, everybody. We're on commercial break. Stand by. All right. How's everybody doing? All right, everybody. Stand by. We're on commercial break. Hey, if you want to advertise for the African History Network, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Let me see. Okay. All right, stand by. We're on commercial break here. Hold on. Just a second. We'll be back in just a minute here. In 1 minute. All right. How's everybody doing? Let's see who we have here. So we got Marlo, Chris, Mary Jo, just a few of the people watching us. Back from break in just a minute, guys. Just stand by. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. Superstation WFDF. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, August 23rd, 2020, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. Also, download the iHeartRadio app. Because you can listen to the African History Network show there and all the shows on 910 a.m. Superstation. Not just the African History Network show, but you can listen to them now on the iHeartRadio app. So download that to your smartphone. Okay, so right before the break, we were talking about a little bit about the Democratic National Convention. Also, the call-in number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Okay, so right before the break, we were talking a little bit about Joe Biden's plan to empower Black America. We were talking a little bit about Ice Cube's contract with Black America. Now, Ice Cube put out a video a couple of days ago. I think it was August 21st, August 22nd. It's 3 minutes, 6 seconds. I watched the video. He said he watched the Democratic National Convention. He said, they didn't address our issues. What do we get out of it, et cetera? Read this article from Newsweek.com. Rapper Ice Cube calls out Democrats after convention. What's in it for the Black community? Okay, now, even though they talked about criminal justice reform, they talked about Social Security, saving the Affordable Health Care Act, raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, because it's been at $7.25 an hour since 2010. They dealt with a number of different issues, okay? If we look at this article here, rapper Ice Cube criticized members of the Democratic Party following this past week's convention, saying that despite all the fanfare, no speakers talked about, quote, a contract with Black America, end quote. That's his contract with Black America. So he was asking what's in it, what do we get? What's in it for the black community after we get Trump out of office? He said a lot of people getting up at the DNC talking and everybody really eating it up, throwing their hands in the air like they just don't care. But what I didn't hear, what's in it for us? Okay, what's in it for the black community besides the same old thing we've been getting from these parties? What's in it for us? For real. He said, I didn't hear anybody mention a contract with Black America. I didn't know. I don't know why, because it's one of the most comprehensive reform documents that's come about in a long time that could really address the problem. But the way it looks, they don't have a plan. Okay, that's not true. That's one of the reasons why I do this show. He said, but if you get Trump out, then now what do we get in the first 100 days? That's what we're trying to figure out. What do we actually get? Things they could get just like that overnight. They just pulled $3 trillion out of the air and gave it to their friends. That's Americans' taxpayer money. That's what, so he's talking about through he's talking about money directed to Trump's friends, Republicans' friends, et cetera, through the CARES Act. And through there's been 4 COVID-19 bills, not just the CARES Act. Ice Cube noted surveys that found 42% of Black-owned businesses are closing, and he questioned how congressional members of either the GOP or Democrats can claim the country has no money for average citizens. Now, you've heard me talk about the $3 trillion HEROES Act that passed the House of Representatives, but it's stuck in the Senate. And Moscow Mitch McConnell let Republicans, well, he let the Senate, not just Republicans in the Senate, let the Senate on recess for a month. Okay. And they didn't come to an agreement with the Democrats on the HEROES bill. And then they also, Republicans, once again, I need a Democrat, no Republican, but let's look at who's doing what. But some people don't want to do that. The HEROES Act passed in the House of Representatives in May 2020 because the extra $600 a week that people get in unemployment insurance from the federal government was set to expire July 31st, 2020. Everybody knew that. Democrats passed their bill in the House of Representatives, $3 trillion HEROES Act, in May 2020. Republicans kept confirming unqualified federal judges. Then they came up with this $1 trillion bill. Republicans in the Senate came up with this $1 trillion bill. They let the $600 a week expire. Donald Trump does an executive order, and it's questionable whether he has the powers to do everything he said the executive order was going to do, to extend partially. First, it was going to be $400 a week. Now it looks like it's going to be $300 a week. But the Republicans in the Senate, well, the Senate is on recess now, so they still haven't come to an agreement with the Democrats on the HEROES bill. Okay, so pay attention to this. No way Mitch McConnell should have sent them on recess for a month. Pay attention to this, Moscow Mitch. All right. So let's look at, I want to go back through once again, and we're going to look at part 1 of Joe Biden's plan for Black America. Okay. It's called Lift Every Voice. Don't get caught up on the name. I'm more concerned with the policies. So let's look at this. So page 1, it says Joe Biden knows that African Americans can never have a fair shot at the American dream so long as entrenched disparities are allowed to quietly chip away at opportunity. He is running for president to rebuild our economy in a way that finally brings everyone along. And that starts by rooting out systemic racism from our laws, our policies, our institutions, and our hearts. Okay. So the first thing to talk about is COVID-19 and the impact COVID-19 has had. Now you can download this. I printed it up. You can read this at joebiden.com. Once again, this is not an endorsement. I printed it up so I could study it. Okay. So it came out to 23 pages. the mission is more important now than ever before, as the health and economic impacts of COVID-19 have shined a light and cruelly exacerbated the disparities long faced by African Americans. In April 2020, Joe Biden called on the Center for Disease Control and Prevention to collect, the CDC, to collect more data regarding how COVID-19 is affecting communities, including breaking down its impact by race. Okay, that was April 2020. The data we've seen so far, now keep in mind, this came out early May 2020, okay? The data we've seen so far suggests that African Americans are dying from COVID-19 at a higher rate than whites. Longstanding systemic inequalities are contributing to this disparity, including the fact that African Americans are more likely to be uninsured, not have health insurance, uninsured, and to live in communities where they are exposed to high levels of air pollution, which deals with the environment and Environmental Protection Agency. And the Trump administration rolling back 100 environmental regulations. Okay, these are regulations put in place either by the Obama administration or previous regulations, and they were kept in place by the Obama administration. New York Times has a big article dealing with how the Trump administration has rolled back 100 environmental regulations, which has then led to a deterioration in the quality of air over the past 3 years. The 2019 census report that comes out every September that deals with income and poverty talks about the deterioration in air over the past 3 years tied to a rollback in environmental regulations. All right. So part 6, I think it's part 6 of Biden's plan, deals with environmental racism and environmental justice. So African Americans also represent an especially high percentage of the frontline workers, putting themselves at greater risk to sustain the economy and keep the rest of the country safe and fed, and are less likely to have a job they can do from home. You've heard me talk about that before, forcing them to make the difficult choice between their health and a paycheck. So when you have Trump pressuring Republican governors like Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, Brian, I stole an election from a black woman named Stacey Abrams Kemp. Remember him? When you have Trump putting pressure on Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida to open the states back up too soon, well, guess who gets called back to work first? Many times African Americans and Hispanics, which puts us in jeopardy, which puts our health in jeopardy. And then when you have the situation of you being called back to work, and if you refuse to go back, if you're collecting unemployment in most of these states, if you are collecting unemployment, your job calls you back to work, you refuse to go back, right? You could lose your unemployment because they're saying, well, wait, no, we're calling you back to work because, well, I don't want to die. You remember Trump asked African Americans in 2016, what the hell do you have to lose? And I told you everything. Your house, your car, health insurance, your life, your business. Biden believes this should be a priority and action must be taken. Okay. Oh, so I'm skipping ahead of myself. Sorry. African Americans also represent an especially high percentage of frontline workers, putting themselves at greater risk to sustain the economy and keep the rest of the country safe and fed, and are less likely to have a job they can do from home, forcing them to make the difficult choice between their health and a paycheck. While there's a lot we don't yet know about COVID-19, we do know that equitable distribution of resources like testing and medical equipment can make a difference in fighting the virus. Biden believes this should be a priority and action must be taken now. So they go on to talk about, and I want to look at this other article here, this group of articles. You heard me talk about this before. CBSnews.com, December 2019. Almost half of all Americans work in low-wage jobs. Almost half of all Americans work in low-wage jobs. 53 million Americans work in low-wage jobs. Most who work in low-wage jobs are between 25 and 54 years old. The median hourly wage is $10.22 an hour. The median hourly wage is $10.22 an hour. Okay. When you talk about, now nobody's going to get rich from this. Okay. But when you talk about raising the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour, where it is now, and it has been there since 2010, to $15 an hour, that makes a huge impact on a lot of these wages and a lot of people's lives. I'm not saying $15 is the ceiling, that's the floor. I'm not saying you're going to get rich, but it makes a big difference. Then we tie that into what we talked about last week, Black Women's Equal Pay Day, and how it takes the average African-American woman 20 months to make the same amount of money that the average white male made the previous 12 months. And the average African-American woman made 62 cents on every dollar. Do you have some states where it's less than that? Like in Louisiana, it's about 47 cents on every dollar. Okay. Now, keep in mind, like I said, I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but I study policy. I study law. July 2019, Democrats in the House of Representatives passed a bill to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour by the year 2025. It's stuck in the Senate. It's not going anywhere in the Senate. Okay, if they do that, all those Republicans and a lot of those poor states like Kentucky, where Moscow Mitch McConnell is, this will benefit a lot of those poor white people that keep voting for Republicans. This will benefit them who lost their health care because they lost their jobs, who are now standing in food lines. This will benefit them, but it's being blocked in the Senate. And no bill can come to the Senate floor for debate or vote without Mitch McConnell's approval, including one dealing with reparations, just so everybody knows, because Mitch McConnell said reparations is dead on arrival in the Senate, and Trump is against reparations also. Okay. So a lot of times, many of us don't understand the process of getting a bill passed through Congress to a president's desk to be signed into office. Because I hear some of the things people say, and it's like, it is a disconnect somewhere. Okay. So this is why we have to go through this. Now, when you read this agenda, and even when you read the contract with Black America from Ice Cube, it shows you, for all those people that think voting doesn't matter in politics, this and that, it shows you how politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Okay. And it shows you how politics and laws and things like this are related to conditions. It's all connected. All right. And this is why Republicans work so hard to suppress the African-American vote. This is why, because they know if, just like in Florida, when the proposition passed to restore voting rights to about 1.4 million former felons, and then it got over 60% approval from when people voted on it statewide, it got over 60% approval. Okay, because they got it on the ballot. Then the Republican controlled state legislature in Florida then put an obstacle in the way of these former felons getting their voting rights back. Okay, so it wasn't just Black people who voted and said ex-felons should get their voting rights back. It was white people voting too, because that'll help a lot of white people who are ex-felons. But you had Republicans in the state legislature who feared this happening. So what they did was they passed a law in the state legislature that stated that the ex-felons had to pay restitution, pay any fines, things like this. They put all these obstacles in the way of them getting their right to vote back. And people say, well, the reason why they're doing this is because they know they're going to be voted out of office. If these ex-felons can vote, most of them will vote these people out of office. This is in Florida, right? Where Ron DeSantis signed that bill into law also. Governor Ron DeSantis, who beat Andrew Gillum, he signed that bill into law. So it's in the courts. It's going back and forth in the courts. I think the last I heard is the ex-felons have gotten their votes, they've gotten their right restored, but it's going back and forth in the courts. But this is just an example of what I'm talking about, okay? All right, how's everybody? Yeah, and Sanford, Florida is where the Trayvon Martin case was, all right? And also, Florida was the first state to have stand your ground laws, okay? And that's the state of Florida, all right? All right. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media page. And follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and my personal page, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. Okay. And I'm not telling people don't go read Ice Cube's Contract Black America if anybody just tuned in. I'm not saying that. Go read it. No, he has some good stuff in there. Okay. But keep in mind, you've heard me deal with Biden's plan months ago because it came out in early May, and a lot of people don't notice. They haven't gone and read it. Biden has some good things in here as well. And this is what we hold him accountable to. The reason I had already said I was going to go through and do this again because a lot of people missed it the first time. And since Biden has the nomination now, et cetera, right, we need to look at this again because this is what we hold Biden to as well as the Democratic Party. So when people ask, what do we get? It's right here. This is not the ceiling, it's the floor, just so people understand. This is not the ceiling, this is the floor. Because there are going to be other things that take place, and there are going to be other bills, other issues that may not be addressed here, that there becomes a movement to push it through Congress, Senate, and get signed into law. Okay, so we have to understand that. The other thing is when especially a presidential candidate, when they put together an agenda like this, they're generally looking at what they reasonably believe they could get accomplished in term, not 2 terms in general. A term is 4 years. So this may not be everything that we need, everything that we want, but we're looking at 1 term. Okay, we're looking at what can be accomplished reasonably in 1 term. All right. And this is, keep in mind, is at the federal level. You still have city government, county government, state government. All right. All right. Let's continue here. Call-in number is 313-778-7600. If you have a question or comment, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, and let's see. Okay. We got Shayaneka, Janice, Dennis. Okay, Dennis said, somebody said, every time it was announced the DOJ made recommendations dealing with police killings and racial bias, Jeff Sessions went and reversed every policy put forth by the Obama administration the first 100 days as AG. Yeah, you're correct. This is an example of how elections have consequences. This is something a lot of people don't understand, because when you look at Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, Donald Trump's first attorney general, who cheered the gutting of the 2013 U.S. Supreme, who cheered the gutting of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. When he became attorney general, one of the first things he did was reverse the 2013 initiative called Smart on Crime. Smart on Crime dealt with backing off of charging low-level nonviolent drug offenders with the longest, harshest sentences. That was under Eric Holder, 2013. Jeff Sessions reversed that. Jeff Sessions also backed off of investigating the patterns and practices of police departments, which there was a record number of those investigations that took place under the Obama administration that led to about 14 or 15 consent decrees. All right. When Jeff Sessions became attorney general, he tried to back out of the consent decree that the Obama administration entered into with the Chicago Police Department and the Baltimore Police Department, and the federal judge would not let him back out. Because the Trump administration has largely taken a hands-off approach to policing, in case you haven't noticed. They've largely taken a hands-off approach to policing. And when Trump ran in 2016, he ran on the platform of law and order. And he actually said on the campaign trail, he doesn't think police should have less power. He said police should have more power. And remember the town hall meeting, remember the town hall meeting that Sean Hannity on Fox News had back in either 2015 or 2016 during the campaign with Trump. And he said they need to have stop and frisk in Chicago, even though stop and frisk had been ruled unconstitutional by a federal judge. Now, in cities that have a largely white population that have been decimated by the opioid crisis, and then the crimes that then come from the opioid crisis, people engaging in prostitution and robbery and things like this to get drugs to buy the opioids. Okay, he's not calling for stop and frisk for white people. He's not calling for stop and frisk for white people committing crimes. But for African Americans, he is. Okay. So once you get past the surface level, because you got some people just put out videos, Democrat, they ain't doing this, not doing that, but then just ignore what Republicans are doing. Just ignore that. Like Republicans don't even exist. I don't even understand that. Okay. But let's continue. We're coming up here on a break in a few minutes. All right. So COVID-19 is also having a disproportionate economic impact on African-American families. African-American small businesses have been hit hard, and over 90% of African-American owned businesses are estimated to be shut out of the initial relief program due to pre-existing systemic disparities in lending. Okay. This is especially dire given that African-American families have less of a, I lost my place. 90% estimated to be shut out of the initial relief program due to pre-existing systemic disparities in lending. This is especially dire given that African-American families have less of a financial cushion to fall back on in hard times. Biden has been calling for the nation's relief and recovery efforts to be equitable and just, including by designing relief programs in ways that avoid methods we know lead to disparate outcomes, so that funds can actually reach African-American families, communities, and small businesses. Donald Trump has not heeded his warnings. If Biden were president today, this is just page one. If Biden were president today, he would make it a top priority to ensure that African-American workers, families, and small businesses got their relief they need and deserve. Tackling systemic racism and fighting for civil rights. Let's see. Okay. Let's go to, okay. Today, we need a comprehensive agenda for African Americans with ambition that matches the scale of the challenge, and with recognition that race neutral policies are not a sufficient response to race-based disparities. Race neutral policies are not a sufficient response to race-based disparities. The Biden plan for Black America it's in 6 parts, like I said. It breaks it down. Advance the economic mobility of African Americans and close the racial wealth and income gaps. Expand, that's 1. 2, expand access to high quality education and tackle racial inequity in our education systems. 2. 3, make far-reaching investments in ending health disparities by race. That's 3. 4, strengthen America's commitment to justice. 5, make the right to vote and the right to equal protection real for African Americans. 6, address environmental justice. Okay, so as I said in the beginning, May and June, we did 6 shows and broke down one of these parts of his plan. We're going to do that all over again starting today. All right, so part 1, advance the economic mobility of African Americans and close the racial wealth and income gaps. Advance the economic mobility of African Americans and close the racial wealth and income gaps. Okay, so the economic portion is pages 2 through 11. So I'm going to give you the highlights of that. because I don't have time just to go through all 9 pages like this. Okay. When we give you the highlights, go read it for yourself. Invest in African-American businesses and entrepreneurs. Invest in African-American businesses and entrepreneurs. Now, approximately 4% of small business owners are African-Americans. And I got to keep track of time here because we're coming up on a break. Approximately 4% of small business owners are African-Americans, even though African-Americans make up approximately 13% of the U.S. population. To build wealth in African-American communities, we must invest in the success of African-American businesses and entrepreneurs. Ensuring equal access to credit and capital. Ensuring equal access to credit and capital. Now, African-American businesses often lack the capital they need to succeed. African-American businesses are rejected at a rate nearly 20% higher than the white-owned firms. Even worse, African-American businesses that do get funding receive only 40% of the funds requested, as compared to 70% of white businesses. Let me repeat that. African-American businesses are rejected at a rate nearly 20% higher than white-owned business firms when it comes to applying for loans. African-American businesses that do get funding receive only 40% of the funds requested, as compared to 70% for white businesses. To increase investments and access to capital, Joe Biden they break it down bullet points. So we'll go over this briefly. 1, double funding for the state small business credit initiative. Double funding for the state small business credit initiative. The Obama-Biden administration created the state small business credit initiative. Okay, not the small business administration, that goes back decades. Okay, but the state small business credit initiative, the SSBCI, was created by the Obama-Biden administration. Now, a lot of people, once again, when you go through and read this, you're going to find out about a lot of policies you didn't know existed, policies that Trump has attacked or weakened, policies that exist that can be taken advantage of, and you see the correlation between policy and condition. Policy and condition. So the Obama-Biden administration created the State Small Business Credit Initiative to support small businesses, driving $10 billion in new lending for each $1 billion in SSBCI funds. Okay, driving $10 billion in new lending for each $1 billion in SSBCI funds. Joe Biden will extend the program through 2025 and double its federal funding to $3 billion, driving close to $30 billion of private sector investments to small businesses, all told, especially those owned by women and people of color. Okay. Now, what's important to note is that the annual federal budget is about $5 trillion. The next one is going to be 5 trillion plus, right? There's money all over the damn place. Problem is, a lot of times we don't know how to access it. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Politics impacts every aspect of our life, from the water we drink to the food we eat to the air we breathe. Okay, there's money all over the place. A lot of times we don't know how to access it. We don't know it exists. Okay, this is why it's important. Whoever your member of the U.S. House of Representatives is, okay, get on their email list. Mine is Brenda Lawrence, 14th Congressional District. I get emails. I get the email newsletter from her. I get the emails about the town hall meetings. Because when you go to like a town hall meeting for your member of Congress, if your member of Congress has one now, if your member of Congress does not have town hall meetings regularly, you need to vote their asses out of office. I'm telling you right now. When you go to those, you find out about the money that exists. There's money all over the place. A lot of times we just don't know where it is. 2, expand the new markets tax credit. Make the program permanent. Expand the new markets tax credit, make the program permanent, and double community development financial institutions funding, CDFI. Double community development financial institutions funding. Okay. The new markets tax credit has helped draw tens of billions of dollars in new capital to low income communities, providing tax credits to investors in community development organizations that support everything from supermarkets to real estate projects to manufacturing plants. A lot of this stuff just goes around. Money just flows through from hand to mouth. A lot of this stuff just happens like at this level up here, and we're down here at the WAP level, wet AP, and don't know this level up here even exists. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, stand by, everybody. We're on commercial break. How's everybody doing? All right, we've got Eric Toomer, Shionika, Marcy, and let's see here on YouTube. Stand by, everybody. Okay, we're on commercial break. We're broadcast on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. Mandatory commercial break. It's out of my control. We'll be back in about 3 or 4 minutes. So stand by. We'll be back in just a minute. Hey, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at email us at customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com, customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com. Okay, we have a new promotion right now to help your African American owned business. Okay, so we have a new promotion right now to help your African American owned business. You get 3 months of email us. We have a special promotion right now, low cost advertising for your African American owned business. Email us at customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com, customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com. Just a second. We'll be back in just a minute. Who has actually read Joe Biden's plan to power Black America, lift every voice? I don't necessarily like the name, but I'm more concerned about the policies. I mean, he could call it whoop daddy. His fault. I mean, I'm more concerned about the policies. But when you understand the history behind the writing of Lift Every Voice, it's dealing with the hope of a new era to come. Okay. This is what that's dealing with. All right, stand by, everybody. We'll be back from commercial break, and I think we'll be back in 2 minutes here. Yeah, and so one of the reasons why I'm taking like 6 weeks to go through this, because I hear the comments on social media, and it's like they ain't never read it before. It's like a lot of people don't even know it exists. So I'm telling you, when you go through and read this, you find out about a lot of programs and pots of money you didn't even know existed.
910 AM Superstation, a division of Adele Media.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the future of radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, August 23rd, 2020. It is hot in the city. It's a hot day here in Detroit. Hope everybody's doing well, staying safe. COVID-19 is still running rapid. When we look at the latest numbers from Johns Hopkins University, we're looking at, and I'll pull it up here, we're looking at about 5.6 million, 5.7 million cases of reported cases of COVID-19. We're close to 180,000 deaths as well, about 178,000, 180,000 deaths. So I'll pull that up. We'll pull up those statistics for you. All right, I want to go back to we're in our second hour. Let's go back to dealing with Joe Biden's plan to empower Black America. It's called Lift Every Voice. You know, I dealt with this back in May and June. Since Joe Biden has accepted the Democratic nomination and he's picked Kamala Harris as his VP, many people are asking, well, what do African Americans get? What do we get? Okay. Well, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot at risk. He has a comprehensive agenda. It's a floor, not a ceiling. So we're going through what he's proposing. Now, these are things that we hold him and Kamala Harris and everybody else in the administration accountable to. These are things that we organize and mobilize and push through the House of Representatives, U.S. Senate, get signed into law. Okay, so two documents I think people should download and read is from indivisibleguide.com. I was on the Marnice Live podcast show this past Thursday. My friend Marnice Chris Jackson of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, and we were talking about it was her Black Liberation series. And one of the things I talked about was a lot of activists that you see in different cities and with what's going on right now. A lot of activists say, well, we don't need to vote. We just need to mobilize and we just need to mobilize and do things like this, right? We just need to mobilize and protest, et cetera. Some of them say we don't need to vote. What's important for people to understand is that you have to have people in office who will respond properly to your protests. You have to have people in office who can be pushed. How they get in office? They were voted in the office. They were either voted or appointed by somebody who was elected. What happens when you have somebody who's obstinate? What happens when you have somebody in office who doesn't care about your protest and they just turn the police on you? So oftentimes, when I teach about 6 principles of political self-defense, this whole concept about political self-defense, understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. One of those principles is understanding which candidates can be pushed in the right direction, which candidates can be pushed the farthest to get the most accomplished. Because a lot of times we don't understand that concept. The real work is not during the election. The real work is after the election and holding the elected officials accountable to the promises they made during the election. So it's a continuous process. All right, but since I don't have continuous time, let's continue. Okay, so we left off on expand the new markets tax credit, make the program permanent, and double community development financial institutions, CDFI funding. This is under the subheading of ensuring equal access to credit and capital, ensuring equal access to credit and capital. Okay, so for for all of the economic empowerment people out there, right? Biden's plan is 22 pages. Pages 2 through 11 deal with economic empowerment. Okay, just so, and I know a little something about this because my degree is in business administration. So I know a little something about this. Now, as part of his plan to reinvest in communities across the country, including in rural areas, and 25% of African Americans live in rural areas now. We don't live in the inner city like Donald Trump thinks. And all women that live in the suburbs are not white suburban housewives either. Just want to throw that out there. As part of his plan to reinvest in communities across the country, including in rural areas, Joe Biden will also double funding for the Community Development Financial Institution, CDFI fund, which supports local mission-driven financial institutions in low-income areas around the U.S. This builds on Biden's proposal to support entrepreneurs in small towns and rural areas by expanding both the rural micro entrepreneur assistance program. There are programs all over the place that exist. How many people are familiar with the rural micro entrepreneur assistance program and the number of rural business investment companies to help rural business attract capital? Now, second subheading or bullet point, improve and expand the small business administration programs that most effectively support African-American owned businesses. Improve and expand the small business administration programs that most effectively support African-American owned businesses. Now, the SBA, the Small Business Administration, the Small Business Administration's programs have been and remain one of the most effective ways of accessing capital for African-American owned businesses. Now, even though we only get a small like 1%, something like that, a small percentage of that, okay, it's still one of the most effective ways and lowest interest. Now, Biden will strengthen these existing programs by, one, ensuring the SBA has the funding it needs to support African-American owned businesses and others in the current crisis and beyond. Trump has once again proposed a massive cut of 25% in the SBA budget for fiscal year 2021, including a 35% cut in funding to small business development centers, a 20% cut to the SBA micro loan program, and significantly increased fees for the 7A loan program, which is the SBA's main loan program for small businesses. Now, making permanent the successful Community Advantage Loan Program originally created during the Obama-Biden administration. The program, which provides capital for startups and growing small businesses located in particularly underserved communities through CDFIs and other mission-driven lenders, has been ran as a pilot program since 2011. Joe Biden will make this program permanent and reverse rules enacted by the Trump administration that are making it more difficult for lenders to participate in the program and lend to African-American owned businesses and other businesses located in underserved communities. All right. Now, there was a article from Forbes, and I want to find that article because the one from Forbes dealt with how almost 50% of Black-owned businesses have been wiped out by the coronavirus economy. Let me find that article here from Forbes. Hold on, I saw it, I had it, and I got a bunch of articles here. All right. Anyway, let's see here. We've got it pulled up. This is from Forbes.com. I want you to go read this article. August 10th, 2020. Your Black World picked it up also. We posted that article. The COVID-19 crisis has wiped out nearly half of Black small businesses. The COVID-19 crisis has wiped out nearly half of small Black businesses. Nearly half of, hold on, this is jumping around. Nearly half of Black small businesses have been wiped out by the end of April 2020 as the pandemic ravaged minority communities disproportionately, according to a report from the New York Federal Reserve. Okay. African-American owned businesses were more than twice as likely to shutter as their white counterparts. The report found. The report said, quote, nationally representative data on small businesses indicate that the number of active business owners fell by 22% from February 2020 to April 2020, the largest drop on record, the report said. The nationally representative data on small businesses indicate that the number of active business owners fell by 22%. The report went on to say Black businesses experienced the most acute decline. with a 41% drop. Latino or Latinx business owners fell by 32%, and Asian business owners dropped by 26%. Okay. African American business owners experienced the most acute decline with a 41% drop. Now, that figure has likely increased substantially as the pandemic has dragged on, with a resurgence of cases this summer that has taken the country's number of infections to a world record of over 5 million. So all this is interconnected. You can't disconnect coronavirus from the economy. You can't disconnect the economy from policies and politics and laws and who's in the White House, who's in Congress. You can't just think, well, we're just going to do economic empowerment and not vote, because politics and laws shape the economic environment your Black-owned business operates within. You ever try to run a Black-owned business during a recession? Like right now? So the number of white-owned small firms, in contrast, fell just 17%. The number of African-American owned small firms fell 41%. The number of white-owned small firms fell 17%. Why have Black businesses been twice as likely to close as their white counterparts, just as Black unemployment is often double that for whites? It's institutional. Now, this is Forbes.com. Forbes is a white business publication, well known in the business world. Okay. It's institutional racism, obviously, but the New York Federal Reserve report analyzes how that manifests itself in banking relationships and lending decisions in cumulative generational ways. The New York Federal Reserve report said, quote, volumes of COVID-19 cases coincide with Black-owned businesses' locations. 2/3 of counties with high levels of Black business activity pre-COVID-19 are in the top 50 COVID affected areas. 2/3 of counties with high levels of Black business activity before COVID-19 are in the top 50 COVID-19 affected areas. Okay. Read the rest of this article here. This is from August 10th, 2020 from Forbes.com. It goes on to say, in the meantime, the coverage gaps in the Paycheck Protection Program left many Black-owned businesses out of the government relief bonanza. Quote, these loans reached only 20% of eligible firms in states with the highest densities of Black-owned firms and in counties with the densest Black-owned business activity. Coverage rates were typically lower than 20%, end quote, the report said. So read this here. This is from Forbes.com. You can get deeper into it. The COVID-19 crisis has wiped out nearly half of Black small businesses. What the hell do you have to lose? The correct answer is everything. All right, let's continue. I know we're coming up on a break. Calling numbers 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600. It's a calling number if you have a question or comment. Let's continue here. So now some of this, just for the sake of time, I'm going to skip over. The next major heading dealing with economic empowerment. This is dealing with part one, advance the economic mobility of African Americans and close the racial wealth and income gaps. Next major heading, increase opportunities for African American owned businesses to obtain or participate in federal contracts. Increase opportunities for African American owned businesses to obtain or participate in federal contracts. Government contracts create millionaires. Government contracts create millionaires. Now, and I used to manage a company owned by one of my former college professors from Wayne State. And we had contracts with the county of Wayne. Wayne, Michigan is the county that Detroit is in. Okay, now we weren't millionaires, nowhere near, but you know, we were able to employ a lot of African Americans. We had contracts with the county of Wayne and also contracts with the state of Michigan. Okay, so I got to learn how, not textbook, not from the textbook, because half that stuff that you learn in business school don't work like that in the real world, especially if you're black. Okay, I'm just keeping it real with you. You go out in the real world and you deal with county government and then also city government. We had a contract with city government, city of Detroit. We had a contract with county government and state government. Okay. Now that's like master's degree education that I got working with government. All right. And we didn't have a nonprofit organization. We had a for-profit organization working with city, county, and state government. Okay. What you learn in the classroom don't prepare you for that. I'm telling you right now. All right. All right. So let's see, how are we? Okay. We got 4 minutes before the break here. All right, let's continue. Okay. So increase opportunities for African-American owned businesses to obtain or participate in federal contracts. Now, in the aftermath of the 2008-2009 financial crisis, financial crisis, well over $100 billion of federal prime contracting dollars were awarded to minority-owned small businesses. Their word, not mine. And between 2013 and 2016, the Obama-Biden administration increased federal prime contract dollars going to small disadvantaged businesses by nearly 30%, from 30.6 billion to 39.1 billion. Okay. I don't know if they break it down based upon specifically black owned business. I don't know. I know with the city of Detroit, when I inquired about this, because I was Mayor Mike Duggan's was his chief of staff. I asked his chief of staff, Mayor Mike Duggan. Mike Duggan is the mayor of Detroit, for those that don't know. Okay. I was on 9:10 a.m. On one of the morning shows a couple of years ago. And I asked her to research for me what percentage of city contracts go to African-American owned businesses. Because each year out of the city of Detroit, $2 billion in city contracts go out. Okay. And she said it was 5% minority contractors. And she said that they did not have a breakdown specifically for black owned businesses. Okay. Even though Detroit is 80% African-American, but they know. So, okay. So I estimate maybe 2 or 3%, because minority also includes white women. Okay. So I estimate 2 or 3% of city contracts, Detroit city contracts, go to African-Americans. Could be less. Doubt if it's more, but it could be less. But she told me when they came in, it was even worse. Okay. So, but so continue. The Obama-Biden administration also created an interagency task force on federal contracting opportunities for small businesses, which included a focus on contracting opportunities for minority-owned businesses. The Obama-Biden administration implemented its vision of more equitable access to federal contracts through a variety of channels, including by launching the Federal Procurement Center, FPC, Federal Procurement Center, as part of the Commerce Department's Minority Business Development Agency, the MBDA. Now, Trump has been trying to phase out the MBDA. Okay. The MBDA is the Minority Business Development Agency. All right. Now, they don't only help. African Americans are not the only people they help, but they do help African Americans. Okay. Research MBDA. Each fiscal year, Trump has been trying to phase them out. All right. Now, the FPC, Federal Procurement Center, a first of its kind program, helps minority owned firms apply for and win federal government contracts. As President Joe Biden will build on these efforts to support the expansion of opportunities for minority-owned small businesses. Now, people should research, especially if you own a business, you provide services, things like this. Research these contracts. Go to research the MBDA. Find out how to become a business that provides contracts to the federal government. You have to be you have to become a certified, I think they may refer to it as a certified vendor or something like that. I know the process for the city of Detroit, county of Wayne, and state of Michigan, because the company I managed, I took us through that process, especially the state of Michigan. Okay, because we had a training contract for a department of the state of Michigan. And I had to learn the process for us to become a vendor, an authorized vendor to the state of Michigan, and then take us through the process and get us certified, right? So at the state level, and it's probably at the federal level, you may go to sba.gov, or I'm not exactly sure the correct website. I know in Michigan, you go to michigan.gov. Okay, at the state level, I pretty much know the process. Go to your state's website. What I did was I searched for how to become a vendor of the state of Michigan. And then what happened was they gave me the information, and the state of Michigan had information sessions. They had seminars at various community centers and community college campuses. I found the date and location for one at Wayne County Community College Eastern Campus, and I knew the people there. I went to it, talked to the woman who was giving the seminar, got her card, explained to her what we were doing, and we're going to provide training services, dealing with construction trades and things like this. And we want to be a vendor to the state. She gave me her card. She said, "Hey, that sounds great. If you need any help, let me know." I went, did the paperwork, submitted it. We became a vendor for the state of Michigan because we already had the contract lined up. Okay. Some of this is not as hard as it may appear, especially if you haven't done it before. Okay, we're past the break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. Superstation Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by, everybody. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. Okay. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Stand by. We'll be back in just a minute here. How's everybody doing? All right. So we have a, let's see, blank list. All right, stand by, everybody. We'll be back in a couple of minutes here. Let me post this article here from Black Press USA also. Black Press USA. It has the link in it to Biden's plan to power Black America. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. Superstation WFDF. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, August 23rd, 2020, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Also my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. All right, internal notifications so you know when we go live. We're also broadcasting on 910 a.m. Superstation's Facebook fan page as well. And you can also listen to us on iHeartRadio. Okay. So we're dealing with a number of different topics, and I'm interweaving these topics here as we once again discuss Joe Biden's 22 page plan to empower Black America. Now, I dealt with this for 6 weeks during May and June of 2020. But since Joe Biden has accepted the Democratic nomination, he's picked his vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris. Many people are asking, well, what does the Black community get? We talked about Ice Cube and his contract with Black America and the video Ice Cube put out in the past day or so. Okay. Asking what does Black America get if Joe Biden becomes president? All right. Now, once again, this agenda has been out since like May 4th, 2020. So I'm going through this again. We're going to spend 6 weeks on this again because some people missed it the first time and a lot of people haven't gone and read it. Okay. Now you can go to joebiden.com, read this in its entirety. I read it 3 times. This is not an endorsement, but we need to study this. Okay. Now, at the beginning of the show, I talked about this story first reported by Bloomberg.com. They were one of the outlets that first reported this, picked up by thegrio.com. Everybody remembers African-American billionaire Robert F. Smith, right? Robert F. Smith is now fighting U.S. criminal tax inquiry. They have an article from August 21st, 2020, updated later, updated also August 21st. And we all remember Robert F. Smith at the commencement address for Morehouse College in 2019, HBCU. And he said he was going to pay the student debt of the entire 2019 class at Morehouse College. Okay. And he challenged others in the audience to, especially the others in the audience, to do that for like the next class. Okay. Well, Bloomberg.com reports federal authorities have spent 4 years now, according to this, okay, I hope this is not true. He does some good work for our people, but federal authorities have spent 4 years examining whether Robert F. Smith failed to pay U.S. taxes on about $200 million in assets that moved through offshore structures. Some of those people said. So this is a report. This was the Justice Department is pursuing this. OK, the article says. Let's continue. OK, Robert F. Smith has not been charged and prosecutors may conclude he owes no taxes on those assets. Robert F. Smith has not been charged and prosecutors may conclude he owes no taxes on those assets. Now, the matter hinges largely on whether Robert F. Smith was actually the beneficial owner of Caribbean entities that received proceeds from his company's first private equity fund, according to 2 people, because this is being investigated by the Justice Department. Okay. He's being pursued by the Justice Department prosecutors and Internal Revenue Service agents for potential tax crimes, according to 4 people familiar with the matter. Now, in reading this article and other articles, it appears that there is someone who is like the main target of the investigation. Okay. Prosecutors are building what may be a larger tax case against an associate of Robert F. Smith named Robert T. Brockman, a Houston businessman, according to Bermuda court records and people familiar with the matter. The Brockman investigation was reported by the Sydney Morning Herald, though the inquiry into Robert F. Smith has not been disclosed previously. The 2 men's business connections involve a jumble of offshore entities, trusts, and foundations, much of it opaque to anyone without subpoena power. Okay. So let me back up just quickly here. So this matter hinges largely on whether Robert F. Smith was actually the beneficial owner of Caribbean entities that received proceeds from his company's first private equity fund, according to two of those four people who are speaking. A portion eventually flowed through the offshore entities into a U.S. charitable foundation where Robert F. Smith is president and founding director. Now, U.S. citizens are required to pay taxes on income anywhere in the world. When the IRS catches mistakes, now this is the article from Bloomberg, okay? Bloomberg is another business publication owned by Mike Bloomberg, all right? When the IRS catches mistakes on a return, on a tax return, taxpayers generally rectify the problem and reach a civil settlement. Prosecutors can bring criminal cases, however, against those who willfully fail to pay taxes or fail to declare their foreign assets. Now, Robert F. Smith is trying to persuade the Justice Department to forego criminal charges and resolve his case with a civil settlement, according to three of the people. Now, this is the reporting from Bloomberg. A conviction could send him to prison and force him out of Vista Equity Partners, which is a money management firm with $65 billion in assets that has brought him fame and a luxe lifestyle. Now, part of his defense rests on a reported pledge by the private equity fund to direct proceeds to charity. If prosecutors determine that the proceeds were designated for charity all along, it could bolster his argument, which was that he was never the beneficial owner and not liable for taxes. Okay, so this is a complicated entanglement, for lack of a better term. It is August, but this is not August Alsina, but this is an entanglement. Okay, so hopefully he comes out of this and not charged. There's no criminal charge. Hopefully he comes out of this okay. All right. Now, recently, Robert F. Smith has talked to prosecutors about possibly cooperating with their investigations in exchange for leniency. One of the people familiar with the matter said, now, this is the reporting from Bloomberg.com. That's because prosecutors are building what may be a larger tax case against a Smith associate, as I stated, Robert T. Brockman, a Houston businessman, according to Bermuda court records and people familiar with the matter. All right. Now, at the time of this article, August 21st, 2020, Robert F. Smith and Vista Equity declined to comment for this article. A spokesman for the Justice Department declined to comment on whether an investigation exists. An IRS spokesman did not respond to emails seeking comment. The Justice Department has discretion in deciding whom to charge, weighing factors such as the prosecution's evidence, the strength of the defense, and the way a jury would likely respond to the facts. Robert F. Smith, a prominent African-American businessman and philanthropist, may be viewed sympathetically by a jury in a time of protest for racial justice, lawyers said. Okay, check out the rest of this article here. We'll post this link here. Now, some people, when I posted this article from thegrio.com, the Grio has an article dealing with this billionaire Robert F. Smith probed by feds for possible criminal charges. Some people said they suspected it has to do with him paying off the student debt of Morehouse College, and he's a successful black man, and they keep messing with him, things like that. That could be part of it. It could be that he is not the subject, the main target of the investigation, and it's somebody else. So we'll have to see. Hopefully he comes out okay in this. So we'll wait more details and reports on this, and maybe you'll put out a statement at some point or so, but hopefully all this works out. Okay. All right. JT, do we have any callers?
No, we do not.
All right, no problem. Okay, how's everybody doing on Facebook? Andrea said it's a scare tactic. She said this is their MO, stop our leaders and those with economic power to make a difference in our communities. Erica Watson said, hopefully this is unfounded. Now, at the same time, you know, I don't know if I should say this or not, but how should I put this so it doesn't sound crazy? So I don't know if the investigation is legitimate or not. I don't. I don't, well, let me put it like this, okay? I'm not attacking the brother. I knew about Robert F. Smith some years before he made the before he stepped up to pay off the student debt at Morehouse College. I read about him in Black Enterprise, okay? There's a few ways some people may look at this. Now, he is married to a white woman, okay? I don't hold that against him. He does a lot of good for our people. That's between him and her, whatever. One way to look at this possibly could be if he is being targeted for the good deeds he is doing for the African-American community, if he's being targeted for that, if the charges are totally unfounded and he's being targeted because of the good things he's doing to help African-Americans.
Hey, Michael, we actually do have we have a couple callers if you want to go to them.
Okay, I'll go to them in just a minute.
Okay, cool.
I'll go to them in just a minute. Would he have been able to get this far if he was married to an African-American woman? I'm not, so let me just, so it doesn't sound crazy. What I'm saying is, right, I'm all for Black people marrying each other. Everybody knows that. Well, what I'm saying is when you deal with a system of white supremacy and racism, has he been spared being targeted in the past? Possibly, because he's married to a white woman, which makes it look so let me put it like this. If he was talking Black power, married to a Black woman, would he have been able to get this far and survive this long without being targeted? If this is a situation where the charges are not founded, they're not just, he's just being targeted for what he's doing. You understand what I'm saying here? All right. So when you start reading, when you start studying this, you start, because this is how I look at this. When I start studying this, now he does a lot of good. I'm not attacking him being married to a white woman at all. But what I'm saying is like, wait a second. For some people at a high level, they move certain ways to push off attacks. They may not say Black power, but they're working to empower their own people. Right? They may do things under the radar. Okay? The more successful you become, we'll go to Carlos in just a second. The more successful you become, the more fame you have. Oftentimes you got to move in a different way, right? Especially when you're trying to do good things to empower your people. Okay, let's go. So who we have on line one, JT?
All right, so we're going to go to Olaf on line one.
Olaf on line one. Welcome to the African History Network show. Olaf, thanks for holding. Go ahead with your question or comment. Tell people which city you're calling from.
Hey, brother, thank you for taking my call, brother. Imhotep. Yeah, I'm here. Detroit in the Brightmoor area.
Detroit, Brightmoor area. Okay.
Yeah, I know about the brother Robert. Roland Martin featured him. He first came out a couple months ago. It was actually a couple more than months. It was before the pandemic about paying for the HBCU
Morehouse College. Yeah.
Tuition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he came through on his commitment too, just so everybody knows. He made a promise first at commencement and he came through on his commitment. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, he absolutely did. And I'm like you, and I hope he comes through this. It's probably just some bogus scam stuff that the federal government trying to throw on the brother, and
right.
I hope he comes through with it okay. But I want to ask you about this upcoming election.
Mm-hmm.
I just, what are your thoughts on Joe Biden's pick with Kamala Harris? I'm not going to go back all with the, what she did in California with black and brown men. And I understand she was a prosecutor, and at that time, weed was illegal down there and everything. But I just got a bad feeling about this election coming up. I just don't think, when you look at the numbers, you had 65% white men that voted for Donald Trump. You had 52% white women, mostly, white, of course, white women, soccer moms that voted for Donald Trump. I don't see them switching up and going towards Kamala Harris. Because when you really look at this election, are we really looking at Joe Biden as president, or are we looking at her as president? Because
you're looking at Biden. You're looking at Biden as president. You're looking at Biden as president, and we skip over 2018 midterm elections because there's a shift.
Right.
There was a shift in 2018 midterm elections where Democrats flipped about 39, 40 districts in the House of Representatives that Trump won. This whole COVID-19 has shifted things. There are a lot of white Republicans who realized they made a mistake with Trump. They did not think it was going to be this bad. They're standing in food lines and never been in food lines before. They've lost their job.
Yeah.
They've lost their health insurance. Donald Trump said he was going to take the economy to places you've never seen before, and he was correct, because when you look at the 32% in the gross domestic product for the second quarter of this year, that set a record. Okay, you got about 30 million people still out of work. It's estimated that half of these jobs that have been lost are not coming back.
That's right.
So are there still going to be some white people that voted for Trump in 2016 vote for him again? Yeah, but there's a lot of people. He's losing educated white people, especially in the suburbs. He's losing educated white women in the suburbs. There's a lot of people who realize this dude was a con man. Okay, what happened was in 2016 you had certain people who said, look, we don't want Hillary Clinton for whatever reason. We're gonna try this guy out.
That's right.
They tried him out and they're getting screwed. Okay. So
that's right.
So, and all you have to do, if you watch, you have Republicans coming out. If you saw the Democratic National Convention, you had Governor John Kasich, former governor of Ohio, who's a Republican, speaking at the Democratic National Convention saying, I'm voting for Joe Biden. You had Colin Powell, General Colin Powell, saying I'm voting for Joe Biden. There's a lot of well-known Republicans coming out. Is more and more every day. They're coming out saying, look, we vote for, they say, look, Americans can't take another 4 years of this fool. What's important for African Americans to do? And I'll let you finish in just a minute. We got to go to the next call. What's important for African Americans to do is to study the policies. That are being proposed and understand how all of this impacts every aspect of our lives. Because a lot of these policies go over our heads and we don't understand how all this works and understand how all that is connected to voting and who you vote for. And also, I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but I study policies. Democrats have to take back control of the U.S. Senate. because a lot of these bills you can't get passed in the Senate because they're being blocked by Senate Majority Leader Moscow Mitch McConnell. There were 433 bills that Democrats passed in the House of Representatives in 2019. About 80% are being blocked in the U.S. Senate right now. Go ahead with your last point. Then I got to get to this next call. Go ahead, Olaf.
Thank you, brother. And I'll be real quick. And I understand where you're coming from, and that's all good. But I'm gonna tell you something.
Mm-hmm.
These white women, they will not be connected to Kamala Harris. They white women and black women are two different entities, and they don't see themselves as a Kamala Harris. You know what I'm saying? I'm just afraid.
Okay.
Let me say this real quick. I just think Joe Biden would have been more safer picking a white male or a black male, like a Hakeem Jeffries or Cory Booker, or even a gay guy from India.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear. Biden said from the beginning he was going to have a female running mate. He said he's going to have a female running mate. No, it's a good thing. No, people don't understand. Donald Trump is anti-woman. So when you have a female running mate, your running mate is the one that can really go and attack Trump. 51% of the country are made up of women. There's a lot of women who realize, you know what? We should have voted for Hillary Clinton. There's a lot of women across the country realize that, you know what? We made a mistake with Trump. All right, man. I got to get to this next caller. All right. All right, Olaf. Thanks for calling. Okay. Who do you have next, JT?
All right. So up next we have Theo.
Hey, is this Theo Broughton from Hood Research?
Yes, it is. And I listen to you every Sunday. Thank you.
Right.
I really appreciate your programs. And when you talked about Black Lives Matter, I thought about this Black Lives Matter even more when they vote.
Mm-hmm.
When you explain it to them, the necessity of them voting when they're protesting and how to get their protest answered. Right. Oh, that was fantastic.
Yeah, because most of the things that they're protesting for deal with politics.
Mm-hmm.
The conditions they're protesting against are the results of bad public policies. So you have to have people in office to properly respond to your protests.
Exactly. Oh, that was just perfect. And when you talked about Moscow, Mitch, that was cool. Mitch McConnell needs to go. And if anybody knows voters in Kentucky related to them, went to school or whatever, call them in Kentucky.
Right.
Because he needs to be out. Well, and if influence comes from around the country to people who live in Kentucky and can vote in Kentucky, it'll be their responsibility to help get him out, because you already explained that he is the one who is preventing 80% of the bills that are on his desk.
He's blocking them. So let me just say this. I'm going to let you continue. See, people have to go to Senate.gov. People go to Senate.gov and research how the U.S. Senate works. OK, the Senate Majority Leader is voted on by the whichever party controls the Senate. So it's Republicans. OK, the Senate, no bill can come to the U.S. Senate floor for debate or a vote without the approval of the Senate Majority Leader. He controls the Senate. OK, he determines when they go on recess, like they're on a 1-month recess right now. They haven't come to an agreement with Democrats on the $3 trillion Heroes Act. OK, but the other thing is that what Mitch McConnell has been good at doing is getting unqualified, ultra conservative young white male judges confirmed to the federal bench. Because Trump has gotten over 200 federal judges confirmed, and these are lifetime appointments. So Republicans can count and they understand law, because they realize that they're not winning the population battle. And when you look at the report from the U.S. Census Bureau, June 2018, it talked about how white people have a negative birth rate in 26 states out of 50. Okay, because they're not winning the population battle. In 2016, that presidential election, many Republicans and even Donald Trump supporters said this is about the courts. They said this is about the U.S. Supreme Court. And this is about the federal courts. We thought they were talking about the basketball court. No, they're talking about the U.S. Supreme Court and the federal courts. Okay, that's what this is about. They want to control federal law, the federal courts for the next 30, 40, possibly 50 years. That's what this is about. Go ahead, Theo.
Yeah. So it would definitely be important for anyone who knows people in the state of Kentucky.
Yep.
What is the lady's name? There's a lady that's campaigning.
McGrath.
Is it Amy?
She's a moderate, but she's better than Mitch McConnell. Amy McGrath. Absolutely. Yeah, in Kentucky.
Absolutely. So please call whoever you have contact with in Kentucky and ask them to be sure and don't register and vote. Now in Florida, you mentioned the returning citizens being stopped because of their fees and fines. But didn't the basketball player pay their fees and fines?
No.
The one that left Cleveland and went to Florida.
You're talking about 1.4 million people. You're talking about 1.4 million ex-offenders.
Ex-offenders. But then I thought he went to Florida and paid some of the fees and fines.
Maybe a few, not for 1.4, not total people. I don't. It may have been a few people. I don't think it was for everybody. Okay, but go ahead to your next point.
Yeah, right. Well, I was just concerned about that. And here in the city of Detroit, bring it home. The ballots go out 6 weeks in advance. Mm-hmm. So that's the middle of September.
Absentee ballots.
And we have to. Oh yes, absentee ballots. Yes.
Okay.
So we have to be concerned about helping to get those back. And her research is putting together a proposal to assist with that, because the primary we had in August is terrible.
Right.
So we want to see if there's something that we can do to make sure that it's more successful because of the post office.
How do people get in touch with you? Is there a website or something? Because we run out of time here. How do people find out about the initiative?
Okay. hoodresearch.org. Email is contact@hoodresearch.org. CONTACT@HOODRESERCH.org. You can follow us on Twitter, and the telephone number is 248-234-2371. That's 248-234-2371.
Okay. All right.
Follow us on Twitter and share the things. Well, thank you for your show.
Okay. All right, Theo. Take care. I'll talk to you later. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So now the other thing for people to understand is when we look at somebody like Moscow Mitch McConnell, this is an example of how one out of 100 U.S. senators can impact the lives of tens of millions of Americans all across the country that are not in his state. He's in Kentucky. This is an example of that. This is an example of how elections have consequences. All right, so we're going to continue this discussion on my social media platforms. Join us at our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network on Facebook, on YouTube, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP on YouTube. If you like this type of information, also you can donate to the African History Network. $, the AHN Show through Cash App, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, and then also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. All right. Remember at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct your own behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo, and we'll talk to you next week. Peace.
Computer trouble? We can fix it.
All right.
All about technology.
All right, everybody stand by. All right, we're going to continue here We do, let me disconnect this call. We do the first 2 hours on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF in Detroit. I do radio here in Detroit. And then we do the rest of the show here on our social media platforms. Okay. Just a second here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and continue. So we're talking about, throughout the show, I was talking about part one of Joe Biden's 22-page Black agenda, or 22-page agenda to empower Black America. Okay. Read the article from Black Press USA. Black Press USA. Read the article entitled Joe Biden's Plan for Empowering Black America. This is from May 5th, 2020. They give an overview of it, and then they have the link to the agenda. You can read it in its entirety. I encourage everybody to read it, because when you read it, you go through one. We talked about Ice Cube and his comments, and about the Democratic National Convention, and Ice Cube talking about his contract with Black America. One, when you read this coming from Biden, you get a better understanding of how politics and laws and policies impact conditions. Okay, just a second here. So, and that's very important to understand, because then you get to see, let me try to log back into the computer. Then you get to see what happens when you have the wrong people in office, and how these policies get attacked, get eroded, etc. All right. All right. So let's continue. So everybody share this broadcasting and social media platforms here. Okay. So we're on page 4. Pages 2 through 11 deal with economic empowerment. All right. So I encourage people to read this, because a lot of comments I see on social media, I can tell people have not read it. All right. So we left off on, okay, so part 1 is titled Advance the Economic Mobility of African Americans and Close the Racial Wealth and Income Gaps. We left off on the subheading of increased funding for the Minority Business Development Agency, increased funding for the Minority Business Development Agency. The MBDA plays a critical role in supporting the development and growth of minority-owned businesses around the country, as well as providing needed assistance to federal and state agencies so that they award minority-owned businesses procurement contracts. The Trump administration has pushed for a 75% cut in the MBDA's budget. Joe Biden will protect and call for increased funding for it. So it's important to note that the annual federal budget is $5 trillion plus. It's the White House that creates the budget. They submit it to Congress for Congress to approve the budget and vote on it. Okay. So the MBDA, the cuts in the funding have been protected when it goes to Congress. Trump is trying to cut it, and he's really trying to phase it out. So the next subheading is protect small and disadvantaged businesses from federal and state contract bundling, which often locks out African-American owned smaller firms from effectively bidding on procurement contracts. So this is something that has been a reversal under the Trump administration from the Obama administration. Joe Biden will build on the anti-bundling provisions of the Small Business Jobs Act of 2020. Research the Small Business Jobs Act of 2020. He will do this by having the Office of Management and Budget, the SBA, Small Business Administration, the MBDA, Minority Business Development Agency, conduct a government-wide review of existing contract bundling to determine whether agencies are following existing rules and whether agencies have the ability to further ensure small business participation in federal and state procurement opportunities. So this whole argument over bundling, what happens was when you have large government contracts that have different parts to it, Under the Obama administration, they broke that up into separate contracts. So smaller firms, especially small African-American owned firms, Hispanic American firms, et cetera, smaller firms could bid on the smaller contracts and get that business, as opposed to having to be able to bid on the entire contract, which will cause them to have more capital, more capacity, et cetera. The Trump administration has reversed that trend against bundling and has bundled more of those contracts, which makes it harder for African-American firms, Hispanic firms, et cetera, to get those contracts, okay? This is something a lot of people don't even know exists. Next subheading, make sure economic relief because of COVID-19 reaches the African-American businesses that need it most. Now, this is one of the problems with the Paycheck Protection program for businesses, and Republicans control the Senate. When I was going through and looking at what was being proposed by Democrats and things like this, what they wanted was much more progressive than what Republicans agreed to. Another thing that's important to understand with this is Donald Trump removed the Inspector General that was supposed to oversee how all these funds were dispersed. Donald Trump removed the Inspector General. So then we find out that Trump and family members and things like this are getting money, et cetera. Right? You remember all that? Go back and research this. Trump removed the Inspector General who was to oversee. He replaced them with one of his cronies. That's a side note. Okay, so the first installment of the Paycheck Protection Program largely left out minority-owned businesses. The Center for Responsible Lending estimates that more than 90% of small businesses owned by people of color would not receive loans. And I went and did broadcasts dealing with this and the obstacles that some African-American owned businesses were going through trying to get funding. Okay. All right. Thanks for the donation, Duval. All right. And $sign the TheAHNShow through Cash App or PayPal.me through PayPal. Okay. So I did broadcast dealing with this and breaking this down. There were some African-American owned businesses that were able to get funding, but the majority were locked out of this. Okay. Now, the Center for Responsible Lending estimates that more than 90% of small businesses owned by people of color would not receive loans. The program is not taking into account the specific challenges that African-American businesses face in assessing funding and complying with the program's requirements. The program is not taking into account the specific challenges the African-American businesses face in assessing funding and complying with the program's requirements. Now, the financial institutions best positioned to help African-American small businesses don't have the systems to quickly deploy the funding in a first come, first serve approach. The second phase set aside $60 billion for community banks and CDFIs, as well as mid-sized banks, which can better serve smaller businesses and minority-owned firms. This is a good start, but more needs to be done. So then they go in, they go and list some bullet points, okay? 1, provide African-American entrepreneurs and small business owners technical assistance to help them apply for funding, as well as legal and accounting support to ensure their documentation, such as their financial records, tax filings, and other legal documents are all in correct order. Now, this is extremely important because a lot of African-American owned businesses get locked out of getting funding like this, but also get locked out of being able to become certified vendors for government, whether it's city, county, or state government, or federal government, to become government contractors because their paperwork isn't right. Okay. So small businesses, especially African-American owned businesses, need help in getting their paperwork correct so they can successfully apply for these loans, as well as government contracts. Now, the Trump administration and these CDFIs and community-focused lenders, the Trump administration and Congress, I should say, should provide an additional infusion of operating capital to these CDFIs and community-focused lenders to ensure all African-American entrepreneurs have access to the technical assistance and support they need. Okay. Second bullet point, reserve half of the new PPP funds for small businesses with 50 employees or less. Reserve half of all of the new PPP funds for small businesses with 50 employees or less. So the bigger and more well-connected are not able to win in a first come, first serve race. So this was one of the complaints that a lot of African-American owned businesses had, where they didn't have the relationships with the banks that a lot of the corporations had. Because a lot of corporations, their bankers will call them up saying, hey, we got these funds set aside. We have these funds here. You want some of this money? Well, a lot of African-American owned businesses had to fight. And if, and some of them may not have business accounts as well, which is another problem also. So there were a number of problems that African-American owned businesses had. Okay. While this will help the vast majority of small businesses, it should also help target more funding to minority-owned businesses, given 90% of all minority and women-owned businesses have fewer than 50 employees. Okay, so reserving half of all the new PPP funds for small businesses with 50 employees or less helps to increases the chance and makes it easier for African-American owned businesses to take advantage of this funding. Next bullet point, produce a weekly dashboard to show which small businesses are accessing loans. Produce a weekly dashboard to show which small businesses are accessing loans. Now, one of the problems with it was over 1 million loans given out. There's over 1 million businesses that took advantage of these PPP dollars, right? Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said that if they received $2 million or less, they were not going to do audits or something like that. The regulation around a lot of this money that went out, the lack of regulation, I should say, the lack of regulation around a lot of this money that went out is like unheard of. These are taxpayer dollars. The lack of regulation doesn't make sense. Produce a weekly dashboard to show which small businesses are accessing loans. Okay. Next point, so you can read the rest of that. Some of this I have to skip over for the sake of time, because the economic part 1 deals with economic empowerment for the African American community. It's pages 2 through 11. I'm on page 5. All right. Supporting African American churches during the COVID-19 crisis. Shelter-in-place orders. While critical to protecting the health of parishioners, have hit churches hard as collection revenue has virtually stopped. African American church. Now this came out in early May. So in some states they may have regular church service again. I hope it's not a lot of them. We do know people, they're having virtual church service, so people are donating online. Okay. African-American churches are especially at risk during the downturn. One survey put the typical African-American membership at just 75 congregants, while others have noted that annual revenue is down since much of it is typically collected during Easter season. At a time when many Americans will seek spiritual assistance and social support, we must ensure the preservation of religious institutions. The decision by Congress to include nonprofit organizations, including religious institutions in the Paycheck Protection Program and Emergency Injury Disaster Loan Programs was a critical first step, but the support has not flowed to these institutions the way it should. Well-connected companies were first in line for the support funding. Biden's True Small Business Fund would also apply to nonprofit groups like African American churches. Okay, so they have subheadings underneath this topic here. Well, we continue with subheadings dealing with the main plank of part 1, which is advance the economic mobility of African Americans and close the racial wealth and income gaps. Okay. So next heading, expand African American home ownership and access to affordable, safe housing. Expand African American home ownership and access to affordable, safe housing. Now, if you go back to my March 17th, 2020 broadcast, I did a comparison between the different policy platforms of the different Democratic candidates and their Black agendas. Some didn't have them, but we looked at policies that would benefit the African American community. We know that Mike Bloomberg had a Black agenda. He had the Greenwood Project, or the Greenwood Project, Greenwood Agenda, right? And he had, it dealt with home ownership for African Americans, increasing the number of African American owned businesses, things like this. So you had a lot of people who said, and Dr. Claude Anderson's one of them. Dr. Claude Anderson's one of my teachers. You know, you've seen some of the interviews, or some of the interviews I've done with him. He said that at the time, Bloomberg was still in the race. He said, Black people should support Mike Bloomberg because Mike Bloomberg has a Black agenda. This was before Biden came out with his agenda. Okay, Biden came out with his agenda. It was right about May 4th, okay, 2020. He had highlights of it previously on his website, and then he came out with the full agenda May 4th. Well, Bloomberg dropped out of the race and endorsed Biden. Biden adopts some of, and he throws his full support behind Biden. Biden adopts some of Bloomberg's agenda. So we're going to spend 6 weeks going through this 22-page agenda dealing with the African-American community from Joe Biden. Read his entire policy platform. I've gone and read his entire policy platform before this agenda came up. Okay, so expand African-American home ownership and access to affordable, safe housing. The gap between African-American and white home ownership is larger today than when the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968. This has contributed to a jaw-dropping racial wealth gap, nearly 1,000% between the median white and African-American households. Because home ownership is how most families save and build wealth, the disparity in home ownership is a central driver of the racial wealth gap. As President Joe Biden will invest $640 billion over 10 years, so every American has access to housing that is affordable, stable, safe, and healthy. Now, this is over 10 years, so that's beyond one term, okay? That's 2 terms going into the third term, or maybe first term, maybe Kamala Harris, or who knows, whatever Democrat. But this is, so we understand, this is $640 billion over 10 years, okay? Biden will invest $640 billion over 10 years, so every American has access to housing that is affordable, stable, safe, and healthy, accessible, energy efficient, and resilient, and located near good schools and with a reasonable commute to their jobs. Biden will, then it goes through and breaks this down in further subheadings or subsections. Help families buy their first homes and build wealth by creating a new refundable, advanceable tax credit of up to $15,000. Help families buy their first homes and build wealth by creating a new refundable, advanceable tax credit of up to $15,000. Building off of a temporary tax credit expanded as part of the Recovery Act, this tax credit will be permanent and advanceable, meaning that homeowners receive the tax credit when they make the purchase instead of waiting to receive the assistance when they file taxes the following year. The next subheading: tackle racial bias that leads to homes in communities of color being assessed by appraisers below their fair value. Tackle racial bias that leads to homes in communities of color being assessed by appraisers below their fair value. Now, there's another problem that African Americans have with tax assessment when it comes to properties, and that's over assessing the tax. That's when the tax liability gets over assessed, because we saw that here in Detroit. Now, one, that's historic. This is one of the ways historically land has been stolen away from African Americans. Okay, it's over assessing the tax responsibility. Then when we can't pay the taxes on the property, it gets foreclosed on. This is historic. We have seen this recently here in the city of Detroit, because it was recently revealed in the past few months that homes in the city of Detroit were over assessed about $600 million in property taxes. And there are a lot of African Americans who lost their homes because they couldn't pay these inflated property taxes. All right. If you read this article from the New York Times, Black people's land stolen. Okay, it's coming up here, because this talks about how historically different ways our land was stolen from. It wasn't just white domestic terrorism. It was also through the laws and through over assessing the property tax responsibility. All right. So tackle racial bias that leads to homes and communities of color being assessed by appraisers below their fair value. Housing in communities primarily comprised of people of color is valued at tens of thousands of dollars below majority white communities, even when all other factors are the same, contributing to the racial wealth gap. To counteract this racial bias, Joe Biden will establish a national standard for housing appraisals that ensures appraisers have adequate training and a full appreciation for neighborhoods and do not hold implicit biases because of a lack of community understanding. Next subheading. Now, the name of this article from New York Times is an opinion piece by Andrew W. Carl. Black people's land was stolen. Black people's land was stolen, June 20th, 2019. And Dr. Carl is an associate professor of history and African-American studies at the university. So check out this article from the New York Times. Black people's land was stolen. Okay, next subheading. Roll back Trump administration policies, fair lending and fair housing protections, strongly enforce fair credit reporting laws, and create a new public credit reporting agency. Roll back Trump administration policies, gutting fair lending and fair housing protections, strongly enforce fair credit reporting laws, and create a new public credit reporting agency. Okay. Now, for the sake of time, some of these headings I'm gonna have to go through. I'm not gonna go through and read this yourself. I'm not gonna have time to just go through and get through all the details. Being able to obtain a credit report is a critical step for home ownership. Biden has long been an advocate for eliminating discrimination in the provision of credit, including his legislation amending the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which prohibited creditors from discriminating against consumer applicants for credit. Today's credit reports, which are issued by just 3 large private companies, are rife with problems. They often contain errors. They leave many credit and quote unquote credit invisible. They leave many people credit invisible due to the sources used to generate a credit score, and they contribute to racial disparities, widening the African American homeownership gap. Biden will create a new public credit reporting agency within the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, the Financial Protection Bureau is an agency that Donald Trump is trying to destroy. This is why he put Mick Mulvaney in charge of, when he first came into office, he put Mick Mulvaney in charge of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Mick Mulvaney has been at odds with the CFPB, and we know it was Senator Elizabeth Warren who was instrumental in getting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau created after the 2000 financial crisis. Okay, so Biden will create a new public credit reporting agency within the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to protect consumers, ensuring the algorithms used for credit scoring don't have a discriminatory impact, and by accepting non-traditional sources of data like rental history and utility bills to establish credit. Okay. And by accepting non-traditional sources of data like rental history and utility bills to establish credit. All right, we'll post the article. We'll post a link to the article from New York Times also. Okay, so next subheading, protect homeowners and renters from abusive lenders and landlords through a new homeowner and rental bill of rights. Now, the other side of this coronavirus economy is going to be massive foreclosures,